Okay, so we're going to talk about the rotations. We do the rotations on August 25th, Wednesday. So the first thing we need to talk about is going back over again. Remember, I'm going to go fast, pause, rewind, etc. Here we're going to talk about what the image is before we transform it. As a reminder, this is our pre-image, pre meaning before. Then we have our image after the transformation. Okay, this is simply just your image. That is it. Vocabulary words, very, very important vocabulary words there. Okay? So we talk about a rotation. We need to remember that a rotation is a turn. And how we can remember that is, I know there are two T's, but rotation, turn. We're going to be transforming about a point. It's not always going to be P, but there's going to be a certain point that is known as the center of rotation. That we're going to rotate this figure around. And what's going to happen is each point and its prime, okay, the pre-image and the image, each point, like A and A prime, will be the exact same distance from that center of rotation. We want to remember this year, all we're doing is we're always, always, always going to be rotating counterclockwise. It is extremely important to remember so we don't go the wrong direction. To remember counterclockwise, we take a look at, okay, well, in math, here are our axes for our coordinate grid. We have our X and our Y axes. We have quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. When we do go around in order from quadrant 1 to 4, we make a C. I discussed this with my class. But also what's happening is when you go in order, you are going counterclockwise. So that's the direction of counterclockwise, counter meaning opposite. If you get confused, look at the clock on the wall in your classroom, and it's the opposite direction that the little red second hand is going. We determine these by degrees, or 4 different degrees. There are only 3 of these that we're actually going to use. The 360 degrees we consider a full turn. This is going to be going all the way around back to the original where you started. So with that being a full turn, let's go back to 90. 90 degrees, if you look at what fraction of 360 90 is, it's 1/4. So this is going to be a fourth a turn. Okay, so we take 4 turns to get back to where we need to go when we're dealing with on the coordinate grid, lining our axes back up. So this is going to be 1 out of those 4 turns, making 180 half a turn. And another thing we could kind of write in parentheses, I know we don't like to leave our fractions unreduced, or not simplified, but we can look at this 2/4, you'll see why in a little bit. 270 then will be 3/4 a turn. Here we need to know that when we are rotating an image, it stays congruent. It's not going to change shape, it's not going to change sizes, so this means it does preserve congruency. What you need to remember, this preserving congruency, this means this is a rigid motion. We learned rigid means it's going to remain congruent. It's going to maintain this congruency. Okay, so we need to make sure another vocabulary term, rigid, goes with congruency. So we'll go ahead and start looking at our first rotation. Now, with our rotation, again, here it tells us to remember that we're always going counterclockwise. Now, if you have lined paper, you can use lined paper, but I'm going to show you with patty paper how we do this so that even if you don't have the patty paper, you can watch this and then see what's going on. And if you got patty paper from your teacher because you knew you were going to be out or you picked patty paper up, go ahead and use the patty paper with me. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take this patty paper, which is just paper that goes between hamburger patties to keep them from sticking, and there's going to be one side or the other that's going to be a little more rough than the other. We want that rough side facing up because it's a little bit easier to write on, and we're going to lie it over our graph. Now I want you to notice that this does not fit perfectly, and that's fine. What we need for this set of notes is we need the origin, because we're rotating around the origin, and we need the pre-image on the paper. Underneath. We don't need any of this stuff, okay? As long as the origin and your pre-image are underneath that patty paper, that's all we need. What we're going to do is we are going to trace, we don't have to do the whole thing, but we're going to trace part of the X and the Y axis, putting a little plus sign there, and then extremely important, 3 things. The little plus in the middle for your X and Y axes, so we can count our turns. You need to do the points, all your points, and you need to label the points. If you do not label the points, when you rotate, we don't know where we're at anymore. Okay, we don't know which one's A, B, or C. So make sure you don't need to connect them on the patty paper. Save some time. Just do the little plus at the axes, the origin, your points and label the points. I already have that done, so I'm going to bring that one in. So if you have patty paper, pause it and do that, and then resume. So here's what I have. I've got the origin, A, B, and C, and labeled. We're going to first start off with a 90-degree rotation. I'm not going to actually plot make the video shorter. When I get the coordinates, I'm not going to actually put the image on here. I'm just going to put the coordinates. When we mean 1/4 a turn, that means we're going to have to turn it 4 times to get it back in place with the original pre-image. Me lining these lines up on our axes, okay? So when we take that 90-degree turns, we saw it's 1/4 a turn. We're going to take this and we're going to rotate it 1 time and stop. Line up that origin, okay? I'm going to stop watching the screen and look at mine so I can make sure to line it up well. And if your points aren't exactly on the crosshair, double check your origin and make sure that's lined up. So now we can go through and we can read our coordinates through the paper. For A prime, I'm seeing that I'm at -2, because remember, this is your 1, 2, third quadrant. And your third quadrant, you have a -x and a -y. I like it because it looks like an owl or a sleeping person. That's my favorite one. So we're going to be at -2, -4. And if you want to go ahead and get the points on your own and then resume, go for it. Okay, that's probably the best idea, so you can see if you can read your coordinates correctly. Your B prime is going to be at a -7, -7. Okay, 7 over here and 7 down. Your C prime, we're going to go -9 all the way over here, and then we're going to be going down -3. Now, what I want to do, if it's your first time doing it, I want you to go back to the original. That way we're practicing switching between different rotations. So here I am back at my original, and we're now going to look at the 180-degree rotation. Your 180-degree rotation, as we wrote above, says that we are doing half a turn. And this is why I put that 2/4 a turn on there. So earlier we just rotated it once. Now we're going to go twice. Ready? 1, 2. See, I'm going counterclockwise also. It's the direction I need to go, counterclockwise. All right? So now we see we have 2 marks here because this means a double prime. This tells us that this is the second transformation. We will talk more about it with our composition transformations, but that's why we have 2 marks. So we know this one came first, then this one came next. So our A double prime, we are in the 1, 2, 3, 4th quadrant, which tells us X will be positive, but Y is going to be negative. So we can always double check, because if I wind up with a negative X when I'm reading my coordinates and I'm in quadrant 4, something happened. Okay? So here we're going to wind up A double prime is going to be +4, -2. B double prime, going to help you out here as I whoops-a-daisy. Our B prime is going to wind up at +7, -7. Again, I encourage you to go and do this on your own. C double prime will wind up at 3, -9. Okay? So let's go back to the original. And we're now going to do 270 degrees. Okay? Now we have a triple prime. Let us know it's the third transformation we did. Again, once we do this, I encourage you to pause it and get your coordinates on your own, so that way you can make sure that you're reading your coordinates correctly. So this was 3/4. So now we're going to move 1, 2, 3, line that origin up, and there are points we can read through and see. We are in the first quadrant. All points are in the first quadrant, so they're all going to be positive. A triple prime is going to come out to +2, +4. I'm assuming you've already written these down yourself, right? B triple prime is going to wind up at +7, -7. C triple prime is going to wind up at +9. Sorry, there should be a +7 there. Sorry about that. Positive. C triple prime should be 9, 3. Okay? So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at each one individually, so that we can see, hey, let's compare our pre-image points and our image points and see what happened. So here, what I'm going to do is I suggest you pause, and we're going to write down all 5 coordinates, or the coordinates of all 5 points. Okay, so I suggest you pause it, and we're just going to write them out. Okay? Now that you've done that and did them on your own, let's check to see if you were right. Your coordinates of point A, your pre-image point A, should have been 2, -3. B would have been 2, -8. C, right here, is going to be at +8, -8. I don't know why I put it that way. Point D, right here, is going to be at +8, -2. Sorry, that's -3. And it is late in the afternoon. -3, we go down 3. And then E, right here, is going to be at +5, -5. So let's take another piece of patty paper. And these I do not have pre-made, but we're going to go ahead and overlap. And we're going to make sure that we have our pre-image and our origin. And I'm going to go ahead and do a little plus sign right here, my X and Y. Okay, right at the origin. I'm going to make sure that I plot my points and I label them. Here's B. And you're taking the time to do this too. If you're using patty paper, please make sure that you do pause it to give yourself some time. On the other ones, I'll pause my video so you don't have to sit here and watch me do it. So now that I have all of these on here, you can see what I have, okay? My origin and the points. Go ahead and line it back up. This problem is asking us to go 90 degrees. We always go counterclockwise. And here I'm going to put the abbreviation CCW, counterclockwise. All right? So we want 90 degrees, which means 1/4 of the turn. So we're going to take this little plus sign here at the origin, and we're going to go counterclockwise only one of the 4 turns. 1. And there we are. Okay? So now I can read through, and I can see where my coordinates are going to be. Please pause it, go figure out the coordinates on your own, and resume and make sure that you have the correct coordinates. All right? Now I'm going to go ahead and pause mine, write them in, and then resume as you are. These should be your coordinates of your A through E prime. Okay? So what we want to do now is we want to compare. Now I'm going to tell you right now, C and C prime, D and D prime are not good points to compare, simply because we have the same exact number. We're trying to figure out what happened between A and A prime. So we can just focus on A and A prime. That way we can come over here and we can write our 90-degree counterclockwise rule. So this is going to go from X, Y, and let's figure out what happened. Well, A, starting down here, we had 2, -3. Now we have 3, 2. Well, one thing I noticed was X and Y switch places. So I know we'll have Y, then X this time. But also, that -3 changed to positive. Look at the original. Okay, look at your pre-image point. Which coordinate is it that changed? It was the Y. So we're going to have a rule -YX. Remember, that does not mean it's negative. We need to change the sign of it. If you take a look at B, 2, -8, we switched them and we made the negative positive. Okay, same thing with, you can see that on point D and D prime. What I'm having students do in class is I'm telling them it's a good idea to tape this on here so you have it. If you don't want it, that's fine. Again, to save time, I'm not going to worry about plotting the points. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Example number 3 wants 180 degrees. Again, we're always going counterclockwise, and this is about the origin. That's what we're doing on these notes. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to lie this patty paper over it. We're going to trace the origin, the points, and label the points. Go ahead and do that on your own. I'm going to pause it. So the next thing you see is going to be, it's going to pop up. So pause the video. And all right, now that you're done with that, we've got this, our origin and our points. And we want to go 180 degrees. So remember, 180 degrees is going to be a half a turn, or that 2/4. Okay, I actually forgot to give you the pre-image points, but we'll do that in a moment. So we're going to turn it counterclockwise. 1 turn out of the 4, 2 turns out of the 4. And now we have our new coordinates. Okay? Again, pause it, figure out the coordinates on your own. Should we get this lined up so I can see where my points are supposed to be? There we go. And write in your coordinates. And so I'm going to, next thing you're going to see is I'm going to pop up with what D, E, and F prime are. So here are your D, E, and F prime points. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and remove the patty paper so that way it's not in my way. And let's look at what our original pre-image points were. Point D was at positive 2, negative 3. Point E, right here, was at positive 3, positive 5. And point F was at negative 1, positive 3. So let's take a look at what a 180-degree rule would be. We're going to go from X, Y to, well, let's take a look. Let's look at D and D prime. D was at 2, negative 3. Now we're at negative 2, 3. Well, what happened between the X coordinates, 2 and negative 2? Well, we have that 2 remain, so we're still going to have that X coordinate, but it changed signs. So we need to change signs of that X. Y, we went from a negative 3 to a positive 3. So we kept the same number. We didn't switch them around or anything, but we changed the sign. So all you do with a 180-degree rotation is just change the sign of everything. Change positives to negatives, negatives to positives. That easy for that one. All right, next, we got a 270-degree rotation. Let's take a look at this. I'll go ahead and give you guys the pre-image points first. We've got X is at 3, 0. Again, you should be doing this yourself. I know it's a little bit above, but it's supposed to be on the axis there. Y is at 5, 5. When we have those consistent numbers, we might want to look at a different coordinate when trying to figure out the rule. Z is at positive 7, 0. Okay? So get that patty paper out, lay it over on top, make sure that the origin and your pre-image are on there. Go ahead and trace them. Oh, like magic. There we have it, right? So with your 270 degrees, again, we are always going counterclockwise. Whether it tells you to or not, always go counterclockwise. There you go. So our 270, if we remember, is 3 of the 4 turns, and we're all going to go counterclockwise. So we're going to go 1, lining that origin up again, 2, 3. And then we're going to read through, figure out what our coordinates are. And here you go. Now, I will be honest with you, it's a little bit more difficult to figure out what's going on. I mean, you can kind of see, a change between, let's look at X and X prime. We see here that our 270-degree rotation is going to go from X, comma, Y. And we do see that the 3 and the 0 are switching places. So we are going to change Y and X around. Now, because we have that 0, that's why it's tricky. Does that change signs or not? Well, take a look at Y and Y prime. Yeah, it's the same number of 5s, so they switch places. So now this is your Y, this is your X, but only one of them changed signs. And the one that's going to change signs is going to be the X. Okay, so there's your rule. You can use the rule, you can use the patty paper, whichever one. If you can use the rule and you're great at it, please do use the rule. Okay? And that is it for rotations about the origin.